It's 5 o'clock. Welcome everybody. My name is John Parmenter. I teach in the history department here at Cornell. I am very pleased today to be hosting an honored guest who came a very long way to speak with us about an aspect of our institution's history that's been hidden for about 150 years. Rick St. Germain is a career educator and community knowledge keeper from the Lac Courte Oreilles Ojibwe community in northern Wisconsin. Educated at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire and Arizona State University, where he did his PhD. He served as tribal chairman of the Lac Courte Oreilles Ojibwe community and taught at various institutions, including Berkeley, the American Indian Graduate Center in Albuquerque, and most recently at his alma mater, University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, where he is a professor emeritus of history. He is currently writing a book on the history of the Lac Courte Oreilles community. So Professor St. Germain is here today to talk to us about a small but surprisingly significant aspect of our institution's history. As many of you know, under the Morrill Act of 1862, the university acquired about 1 million acres of land in what are now 3 states, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Kansas. All that land has been sold, but in the state of Wisconsin, there is a severed 50% mineral interest on about 155,000 acres of land. On one 160-acre parcel of that portfolio is a very significant place, the Blue Hills Pipestone Quarry, site of sacred significance to the region's indigenous people for at least the last 7,000 years. So Professor St. Germain is going to speak to us this afternoon on the historic relationship of Wisconsin's Anishinaabe communities to the quarry, how that relationship has been disrupted by non-Indigenous ownership of the quarry, and what it would mean for his community and others to have improved access to this site and its culturally significant resources. This is a very special day. It's a joyous day in many ways, made possible by the hard work and most importantly, the financial support of a number of campus entities. And I want to take this moment to thank the history department, the history department's public history initiative, the American Indian and Indigenous Studies program, the American Studies program, getting a point here, and the Department of Anthropology for all their help in making this possible. And I would be remiss if I did not say miigwech to Mike Klewitter of the Lac Courte Oreilles Community Tribal University, who bodily dragged Rick over to me when I was out there last August and said, "You got to talk to this guy." And that made the whole trip worth it. And so Mike, when you're out there, thank you very much, and miigwech. Okay, so please everyone join me in welcoming Rick St. Germain to come out.
Good evening, folks, and thank you so much for inviting me here to Cornell University at the base of one of the Finger Lakes of this beautiful country. I was just marveling, flying in over here and looking down at the topography of this region. And I said, gee, this looks so close to home. Up in northern Wisconsin near Lake Superior, we too have a number of hills. We're deeply forested and quite remote, and not too many cities in the region outside of Minneapolis, St. Paul metro area, but we're pretty remote and isolated, and our tribes up there are known as the Anishinaabe people. That's an Algonquian people who once lived east of here, over in that direction. And we migrated. We migrated from near the Atlantic Ocean, in that New Brunswick area, and we moved through this area and ended up in that area around Lake Superior. And there's quite a history that goes with that migration. And one of the marvelous things that happened is with the revival of many of the customs of the Anishinaabe people in that region south of Lake Superior in recent years. we're relearning our languages. We're moving back to the Madewiwin spiritual way of life. And so lots of our younger people are leading in that movement. They're not only students of the language, but they're also becoming teachers of the language. And for old timers like myself, who've been around for a number of years and have seen that revival of way of life, it's become very important to us. And we, of course, are teachers ourselves. The elders of our tribe are very good at teaching, and I was sharing with John some of the customs of our tribe and the way that our elders, 50, 60 years or more ago, used to take us young people out to some of these sacred sites. And this site, Ojibwe Bimadina, is what we call this place that is very sacred to us. And other people know that as the Blue Hills Quarry site for the pipestone. Folks, pipestone is a very sacred product to the Anishinaabe people, and also all of the woodland tribes and the plains tribes hold the pipe in such heartfelt manner in which we transmit our prayers to the Creator and to all of the spirits that dwell in our region. And that was the message I brought this morning when I met with the class, that our people are ones that believe that its spirits inhabit everything. They inhabit the trees and the animals and the lakes and the waters. And they sometimes are ancestors who come back and visit us. And we have this reverence then for the environment, and we have a close relationship. And this place here is one of those places, and I hope tonight and in a brief amount of time to share some of those stories and some of those accounts of the things that we did at this place at the quarry site, which is very dear to us. One of the things that I wanted to do, since I'm talking about the pipestone, this pipe here is actually made from a friend who used to sneak in there and quarry at that site. And I say sneak in because there was a time when this, again, was commonly visited by our people. And it was our place. And it was south of our reservation. By the way, what you're looking at up here is a aerial view of our reservation. And you can see our geography is filled with lakes and forest. We once owned 21 million acres. That was our homeland in northern Wisconsin. And our homeland has riches beyond imagination. And part of those riches are the way that we worship. So what I'm going to do, I loaded this pipe. I'm going to start this session with a prayer. And let me just demonstrate to you what a common prayer is for all of our spiritual ceremonies. We always start with the pipe. And that is made, again, by this product that is very dear to us. Ashkena, and in the way, Maganadug, Gweg, Wawin, the moon, Nim, Mu, Dimada, Onagoyega, Asema, Nima, Dananadama, Geeg, Dananabishka, Geeg, Asema, and then the Mongwang Gil Manadug. Ojibwa Minawa, Gimin de Goyan, Usema, Agwejama Goyan, the Anakanotawa, Ukea, Wijichigewad, Oma, Nungum. Gibi Duna Wadama, Wisdom, Da. Nunjige wad widuka wawad, manidu when engweja mawag, ma bija wadama. Midasha geye, kinago aya jigamwa. Gimin de goyam, gi asawadama asema. Gay when the wa, when the queen of mawag, we when it dasha jibama disabad. Spin, and nu the wada oo. Mishumas na mikana gwe newe kwaja tuyan gwe gashika giga duyan oma nungum debashpo gika giga duwa madesh boyan magit zima madesh ka bewas kinga de goya kazudun gego nawa nikia and gamuwen ka giga de winage ginga de goya kazudun. To name them a word Anishinaabeg, Kinago ya jigamwa. Geabe da. Kabishige wad true nishishin midwain bemad disiwan. When I was a little boy, the old timers lived on this reservation without roads, without automobiles, no electricity, and reverence for the land. And as I mentioned earlier, the native people had a relationship with the property of our trees and with the waters of our lake and our streams. And we traveled distances to other neighboring tribes. And one of the important things that we did in our Medewin ceremonies is we initiated young people into that spiritual way of life. And we still have continued that today. One of the very important parts of that ceremony is the gifting of the pipe to our initiates. And without that gifting, we break a bond with the earth. So it's really critical as a part of our lives. Today, we have to travel way over to Minnesota, southern Minnesota, which is many hundreds of miles away. And there we can mine a soft pipestone. Let me relate that we do have what did we do with that? Oh, I see. We have to use that.
Yeah.
This ain't working.
Oh, okay.
There we go. How did you do that? Oh, okay. All right. Things that I mentioned was that The Anishinaabe people first lived on Lake Superior, and they refrained from moving inland because the area south of Lake Superior was filled with huge pine trees. And that coniferous forest really wasn't suited for one of the animals that we needed, and that animal was the white-tailed deer. In order to survive in the late 1600s and early 1700s, we needed elk, moose, and white-tailed deer. And because of the pine forest, there wasn't a browse underneath those huge forests. But there were burn areas, and some of those burn areas were places where forest fires had started from bad storms. And we found that place at Lac Courte Oreilles. We found that burn area place. From Lac Courte Oreilles, the settling of that in the early 1700s, we spread out. Tribes cannot survive in a settlement over the winter months. They have to move about the land, and they have to hunt and find the smaller burn areas. And that's what our people did at Lac Courte Oreilles in the early 1700s. We created seasonal hunting camps and fishing camps at outlying places. We call those places the outliers. And so that's how we settled this region of northern Wisconsin and northern Minnesota. And we could survive on the deer that were found in those burn areas because deciduous trees grew up in the areas that were devastated from the pine. Jawashka Bimadina was one of those places. We found that place. And we know from archaeological evidence that tribes before us, the Black Duck Society was one that lived there thousands of years. And they were mound builders. And they too harvested pipestone from this spot. Now, why is this place so important? Because making pipes is a matter of finding the places where there is soft pipestone. And that's the product that lacks quartz, the product quartz. The red pipe has an enduring value to the woodlands tribes and also the plains tribes. And the pipe is an instrument, as I mentioned earlier, that delivers our prayers to the spirit world around us. And that's the essence of our Medewawan belief system. And also our Chidewegan Ogichidasa way of life. And the songs and the prayers then are this essence of messages. And that's what we are reviving, and we have been reviving for the past 50 years on my reservation in northern Wisconsin. The Medewawan now is commonly practiced in our region, and it's a healing system and a way of belief and our connection again to the earth. The pipe is essential to this belief system. And I mentioned that there are other places right on our reservation. We have a mining site that does have pipestone, but it is a hard rock, and it's very difficult to shape that and fashion it. Years ago, our families on our reservation had tools that they held in a buckskin wrap. And they brought these tools then to that Catlinite site in Barron County. And I was relating to John earlier that my brother was a pipe maker. And he would go up into our site on the reservation and chip away at the stone, and he would dig down deeper where it was a bit softer. But the problem with most sites in North America is that it's a harder product and it only lasts about a day. If you don't start fashioning in 1 day's time, it becomes very difficult to shape it and chip it and move it into a product that is useful for our purposes. My brother was one of those who used to mine the hard pipestone. And he said to me, Rick, when I give this as a gift, he says, can you imagine the amount of work that went into this? So in some ways, he said, maybe the creator has more of an appreciation of those who work the hard stone. But what happened was our people lost our site. And by the way, this individual who's pictured in this slide was a man by the name of Kawense. And he was our headman who signed a number of treaties for our Lac Courte Oreilles tribe. And he lived in the years 1807 to 1893. And he was a signator for our tribe for the treaties of 1825, 1837, 1842, and 1854. And a very significant leader. And look what he's holding. At every one of these treaty sessions with the United States government agents, all of the headmen carried with them these pipes. And as their way of showing their solemn duty in conducting business on behalf of our tribe, they smoked that pipe. And the historians sometime erroneously referred to these pipes as the peace pipe. As the peace pipe. They said this was the way that the headmen of the tribes made a peace with the US government and with the Americans. And it wasn't. It was nothing more than a sacred, solemn duty and a promise to uphold the rights that were negotiated in those treaties. I mentioned the treaties. And what you see on this map are the lands that were lost by the Anishinaabe people. And they're referred to today as the Ojibwe. These were the cession areas that they lost. And this region right here is the region that that we gave up in the treaties of 1837 and 1842 right here. That represents 21 million acres of land. And when we gave up those lands, our homelands, we negotiated the right to continue living on those lands and using the resources. They're called the usufructuary rights of the property. Even though we sold the lands, we retained not the subsurface mineral rights, but we retained the right to hunt, fish, and gather products for our survival off of those lands. and also the right to remain on the lands, not be removed as other tribes before us. Friends, the tribes down here in southern Wisconsin and southern Michigan and parts of Indiana and Ohio were removed. Those tribes were subject to the Removal Act of 1830. And that's what our tribes feared, that we too were going to be pushed out. And believe it or not, in 1850, the federal government ordered our removal. And the president signed a removal order of the Ojibwe tribes, and we got sent over here to Minnesota. So the promises that were made in the treaty did not hold much significance to the leaders that succeeded those who signed the treaties of 37 and 42. And one of our headmen, Bijiki, traveled to Washington and met with the president, the new president, and negotiated a return and an honoring of those two treaties. However, we lost the land, and lumbermen moved in, and in a matter of a couple decades, they denuded the lands of all of the pine trees and the hardwoods and the softwoods. And in no time at all, they turned northern Wisconsin into a farmland. It was just simply sheared off. We were finally able to negotiate a settlement and the designation of reservations. And that was done in 1873. And so our reservation is located right here. There's another piece of a reservation that is located over here west of us. And there's a reservation that's located over here and here and here. And those are the Ojibwe reservation tribes today. We lost so much. We lost the use of the forests and the streams. And years later, as our hunters continued hunting off of the land, they were arrested by state game wardens and thrown into jail. And there was a test case done in Wisconsin in 1911. And again, our tribe lost. It was a state Supreme Court ruling against our tribe that we had given up our reserved right to continue hunting and fishing and gathering. We appealed that case in 1974. My reservation filed a suit against the state of Wisconsin, and our case we lost, and we appealed that to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Chicago, and we won in 1983. So that was a controversial ruling in 1983. The state appealed that to the Supreme Court. And so we next went to the Supreme Court, which basically recognized the case law from the Seventh Circuit. And then over here, one of our sister tribes at Mille Lacs had the same problem with the state of Minnesota, and they took their case to the Supreme Court as well. And in 1991, the Mille Lacs tribe was issued a favorable ruling from the US Supreme Court. So these cases have been brought before the high courts, and we regained some of our reserved rights. But we lost some of those sacred sites that a man by the name of Mashkode, who was the last of the great medicine man on my reservation. And Mashkode used to take us to places around northern Wisconsin that were at one time sacred. Do you notice a similarity in these two maps? One is a topography map over on the right, and the other is a bedrock geology map of the same area. And if you squint your eyes, you can almost see a pattern. These areas right here, and I don't misplace my pointer, but these areas right here are the places where the pipestone is located, right here, and up in here. And it's right on the edge of a geologic formation. And this was what I was mentioning to you earlier about our place having some high hills. Not quite as the majestic hills you have here, but certainly I was so excited when I came in and saw your hills. Mashkode would gather, he would say, Rick, I want you to get some of the boys together, and I want to take you over to a place to the west. And we'd all jump in a couple cars and we'd pick him up. And he was a man who was about 80 years old, and he was a medicine man. And he always called us his boys. And he spoke the language, of course, fluently, and he was our medicine man, and he could do healing, and he conducted Medewan rites, and he taught many of us ways of our Chedewegen Ogichida, and also our Medewan spiritual ceremonies. But I remember on several occasions he would take us to real significant places, and then we would sit and he'd bring out his pipe, and some of us would bring our pipes out, and we would smoke, and then he would pray. But when he got to the Barron County Pipestone site, and this was way back in the 1970s and also the 80s, we would walk in, we would drive our vehicles down to this place south of our reservation. And we would walk in, and he would be telling us stories about the families who made that same trip, and they made it by horses or wagons. And he said, there literally were no roads in those days. And when we got there, he would say, who brought the food? And so somebody would bring out the food, and he said, in the old days, our wives would cook as soon as we got here. And that was spirit food, he said. So it was honored. And Mashkode would pray over the food, and he would bring out his pipe and then do that ceremonial ritual. And he would say, this pipe came from here. This came from here. He said, this pipe was gifted to me in one of the midday ceremonies. This pipe is very dear to me. It came from here. And he said, this is a soft stone here, not like our stone on the reservation. And he said, in older times, way before I was born, he said the men would come here and they would have to set up we would put sentries out to the south of us to guard against the Dakota Indians who were our enemies. And he said, we lost people in this area. I mentioned the outliers. We had outlier communities located just to the east of that the west of that Pipestone site at Rice Lake. And just to the north of this site at Red Cedar Lake. And it was Red Cedar because of all the places in northern Wisconsin, here was a lake that was red. Why would there be one lake that had a red tone to it? What do we know about geology? There probably was some iron in that area. Red Cedar Lake, and also Long Lake just to the north of that site over there. We had villages that were created as outliers off of our main village at Odawasa, our reservation. And Omashkus would pray to them. He would take us to those sites and show us where the villages were. And then he would relate to us the value of the pipestone. He said, this place here has a special spirit. And let's see if I got that slide. He called it, when he prayed with his pipe, he said, the spirit here that is very unique is the one that's directly above. Every place had an association of spirits. And this place he referred to as Mashkode. And that's how he prayed to that spirit. So our friend who passed away in 1994, and I've been back to this place 2 times, and I brought one of my sons to this place. And that's who I prayed to there with my pipe. The value of the pipestone, again, I need to reinforce that concept, is gifting the pipe to initiates in our Mudewiwin belief system. And it creates a bond with the giver. So the people who have given me 2 pipes are people that I'm very close with and help me move into this way of life. Making pipes is a dying craft in Wisconsin because the soft pipestone quarry is now denied to us. Our people have been turned away from there. There are new owners, and the people who customarily went to this place now have spread the word that we were no longer welcome at this place. One of the things that I was relating earlier was that a quarry has to be dug. There's quite a bit of work to it. And it's sandwiched between other mineral layers. This is the quarry. This is the quarry site. It's now in the National Register of historic places. And historically, it's always mentioned as the place of the tribes. This was a commonly accessed place for our tribal people. And our tribal people from the neighboring Ojibwe reservations also traveled here great distances. They endured much hardship to get here. Cornell University has an interest, a subsurface mineral interest in this site. They once owned this place and they sold it. And then eventually it moved to the ownership of the county, the Barron County near Rice Lake. And our people were turned away. We could no longer go there as we once did. That ritual has been taken away from us. And the gifting of pipestone is very seldom made anymore. When I encountered Professor Parmenter, I began to think about what if the quarry site were once again made accessible to us? It could restore our historic way of mining the pipestone, the soft pipestone from this quarry. And it could help reignite this traditional craft of which our tools were held in a bundle. And there's quite an art to fashioning a pipe. There's some framework that has to be done with the stone and chipping away and digging and uncovering the deeper stone that is moist and soft. And then the families would take that stone off to an area. If you're facing the mine site, they would take it off to the left and they would go uphill a ways. And there they would sit, all the family members would begin with each of them with their craft, with their tools from the bundle. And they would begin shaping their pipe. Mashkode would tell us, did you boys dream as I told you to? And some of our fellows would nod. We'd say, yes, we tried. One of the boys would say, I dreamed. I saw an animal. And that has to be part of the pipe. Today, there are clan animals that are created. Well, I shouldn't say today, but I think from the mid 1800s, they began including their clans on the pipes. These pipes that were fashioned were part of the customary dreams. And those of us who said, I couldn't dream about the pipe, he'd say, we'll go ahead and make an ordinary one then. We have a school, Wadukadadi, we call it. It's a language immersion school, and we teach subjects from the state standards. And we do it in the Ojibwe language. And there's many young people who are teaching in that school now. They've gone through schools like that. And we're restoring our language now to the people. I work with those students, and I just smile sometimes when they begin speaking. in coherent sentences. And if I were able to bring them back to this place, it would now become a part of our curriculum. We would incorporate it into our language curriculum. And I could help with some of the stories that were shared with us when I was younger. And there's other tribes in our area who would also journey to this place again, who once used to travel here from great distances. It's my hope that the university will look favorably upon this remote site on the side of a steep hill in northern Wisconsin. That was once a very dear and sacred place to the Ojibwe people of northern Wisconsin. And there would be much joy were that subsurface mining rights were restored to our people. I want to thank you for being attentive tonight, and I'll open it up for questions.
Well, thank you. Let's sit down.
Excuse me. Oh,
So I'll be happy to take a few questions from people here. I also wanted to say to the folks who are with us online that a PDF of the slides will be automatically emailed to your email addresses probably within 24, 36 hours. We just have to process that digitally. So that will be available. And this will be uploaded on our Cornell University Indigenous Discussion blog as well. But please, if there are questions for Professor Germaine. Yes.
So, thank you so much for talking to us and showing my father's history. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so I get a chance to visit Blue Claire and Madison sometimes. I guess growing up, like in my Wisconsin education, we didn't get as much exposure or understanding like Wisconsin ground and its history. And I'm sure like across the US, everyone here, like their schools didn't do the best job at informing them. I was actually interested in when you're talking about how today, you mentioned about the integration of the language into schools. Can you share more about what's happening now?
what's happening now is there's a revival of the spiritual way of life in Wisconsin and Minnesota. It's really becoming widespread. And with that, when I was younger, the old people used to warn us. They would say there's going to be a day when no one speaks the language anymore. And that's the way we communicate with the spirits. And so 50 some years ago, some of us began learning the language. I shared with John that there actually was a time when the elders used to conduct our ceremonies, our quarterly ceremonies of the Chide Wegan Wichita. And the last speaker, the last leader of that ceremony passed away. And we all came into the lodge and sat down. And we just sat there stunned because nobody got up and began the ceremony, the rituals. And we had the pipes and we had everything there. And we always, us younger guys, just sort of used to depend on the older guys. And I didn't know what to do. I was not in their league. And I just felt so incompetent. And finally, one of the other younger guys came over and sat next to me and he said, "Rick, it's either you or I gotta do it. You've gotta get up and start the thing going. And it was embarrassing to be there and to see this happen before our own eyes and not really do anything about it. We really, Paul Germaine, who was the other fellow, and myself, we really hadn't prepared for this. So we just got up and began speaking. And we didn't do things right those first few times, but we got it down. And then what I noticed is more and more of the younger fellows and ladies began picking up again and acquiring that language. And now we've got schools that teach the language. And when I go to these ceremonies now, it's the kids, it's the young people again who are now, we've turned over those functions to them because us old timers, we're not going to be around a lot longer. And so it's time to pass on that responsibility. You're doing very well. That's a good part of what our school has done. It's really taught the conversational language and the writing and the subject matter and the development of our curriculum, which we're always working on. But it's heartening to see that happening in so many places in our region. And now I know this is gonna carry on. So we wish for that question.
Is there a separate alphabet for the language, like this Cherokee?
There, we use the Roman, or excuse me, we use the English version, but there's some sounds that we don't include. And there are other things we put into the language. There's some sounds that you just make up. And, we haven't created a typewriter yet like the Navajo people have. They've got some beautiful sounds. But we have sounds that we're working on in ways of getting the alphabet. So it's a lot of work. And we have some folks working on medical terminology to create new words.
Paul?
Thanks for being here and thank you for the talk. I'm also from Milwaukee, so a bit older though. So I mean, it's when I might get to a very practical question, but it was great to be. I mean, seeing with you, like we learned nothing in our education about this. I was old enough in the 80s when the treaty.
When
it got hot.
When it got hot.
Really hot. And so that was my first awareness. When there was restoration of the hunting and fishing rights, and it got very confrontational.
Yeah.
And that's
they were trying to kill us.
Exactly. I mean, the white response at that time
was terrible.
Terrible. It was complete outrage and complete lack of understanding about anything. And there was no reporting to actually like explain any history. I mean, it's like none of the media were doing their part at all to help inform the situation. So, I mean, so just to like say, even though the restoration of the rights came as far as hunting and fishing, the backlash was just enormous. And I think this is kind of important for the room to understand like how hot and how truly violent it became.
We would launch our boats from a public landing as was required in the agreement with the state. And we would launch a dozen boats. And as the boats got out off of the landing and into the water and the fishermen would start moving our tribal boats out, all of a sudden we'd have 1,000 non-Indians there with slingshots, and they would pepper us with steelies. And we were hit, and some of our people wore helmets, but we were really, a lot of our people were injured and tires were slashed on the trailers and vehicles. And non-Indians people in the state really resented the fact that we regained this right to hunt and fish in the territory that we ceded to the United States in the 19th century treaties. And they fought with tooth and nail and really attacked us. And we really didn't have many friends. This was a Supreme Court ruling restoring our rights. And it was described by some newspapers as reaccounts of violence in the South of the 1950s. The reaction was horrible. And it took quite a while to get over it. Just the other night, some of our fishermen went out from a launch near our reservation, and their tires were all slashed. So it still happens. And last year, some of our fishermen were fishing and we fish at night, and gunshots went off over their heads. And the law enforcement people were called in, but they couldn't find out who had been shooting. And they weren't shooting at the fishermen, they were just shooting up over their heads, and they were shooting branches along the river over the heads of the tribal fishermen. So there still is a deep resentment over the renewal of these rights to our tribal people. Yes.
Just follow up.
Yeah, just, yeah.
Right, without a question, getting back to, so the Blue Hills Quarry site is now Barron County owns it?
Yeah.
And so that it's Barron County government that's not allowing you access. It's Cornell that owns the mineral rights.
It's different from the mineral rights, but they're just saying, we don't want you in here and you better stay out of here or we'll arrest you for trespass.
So it's not a private owner, but it's a
It's
local
the
government.
county. Yeah,
So
local government.
If I could interject, actually, there's a point of clarification on that. So when I went out and talked to Rick, the story that the county has given people in his community and other Ojibwe communities in Wisconsin is that Cornell owns, quote, all the rights. And people in the community have to get written permission from the university to go on there. That's been the premise that they've used to kick them off, as I understand it.
But if that's the case, then if they actually believe that, couldn't we get Cornell to get the rights?
Well, the idea here is that as the surface owner, the county has a 50% interest in the mineral rights. The university's 50% interest, were it to be transferred to the Lac Courte Oreilles community, for example, would give them legal standing in Wisconsin law to negotiate access with the county. That's the basic point.
Good.
As it comes down to it. That's just the clarification. We had an email to this university, and my colleague Kurt Jordan will remember this, in 2007, that came into the university asking precisely that question.
Okay.
And the embarrassing thing for all of us is that none of us knew how to answer it at that time. So today is the beginning of our answer to that email. Yeah, the gentleman behind Paul had a
That was
question.
my question.
Oh.
So,
It's a bit of a complicated thing, but that is as clearly as I can explain it, because that was a surprise to me when I went out and talked to him, that is the story they had been told.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the situation is with the county, and I don't want to, that was what I was told. I don't know what their current understanding of it is. The personnel may have changed since that happened. I don't know, but the basic point, I think that Rick illustrated so well for us today, is that the community's access to this site is not free and easy. Right? Is not something that people can do without, as you said, sort of sneaking onto the property. I mean, I went out to that property, I got lost in the woods. Sorry, that's me. But I'm a white guy. I walk out there Sunday morning, no one's asking me any questions. Okay, that's probably the difference, right? So I think that's sort of the issue here. So that's kind of what we're up to here. That's the point of a lot of this conversation. And it's to me, it's a really sort of important thing that I think the university could do.
So are there ongoing conversations within the university right now? or-
My knowledge, I have no knowledge of that. Can't say. Yeah, sorry, back there.
I'm just wondering, like, if there are ways that we can put pressure on the university in order to return the land.
Well, let me get it straight here. The land's gone. Land's been sold. We can't return any land. Okay, that's all been sold to private owners. What the university has retained on the deeds to 155,000 acres of land in Wisconsin is this 50% mineral interest. And all we're talking about today is this particular parcel. It's 160 acres out of 155,000. That's all we're talking about.
Is it possible for the school to give that, like, the 50% rights
I
back to the tribes?
I would imagine it is. It's above my pay grade. Okay, I can't do that. I can only bring people's to the awareness of the situation. And it is a complicated situation. It took me like the better part of a year to untangle it and figure it out. It took going out there and talking to people. It took access to the real estate office at the university, which I was very generously given, and I'm grateful for that. And if I hadn't gotten that access, we never would have known any of this stuff. Okay, it would have just been sitting in file boxes up at the real estate office by the airport, forgotten. Okay, so we've opened up something here, and it's something we want to keep talking about and raising awareness about. That's my job. That's what I'm trying to do, and that's what Rick has come to help us do, very capably, I might add. And I think that's the point. Okay, so the knowledge about this is what we need. Okay, the action comes from other sectors of the university that we don't control.
Thank you so much for coming here and
Thank
speaking
you.
with us. The university really has sort of this false narrative of, since we're a land grant university, like making a statement in front of our lectures that this farm is somehow healed or that there's a possibility for healing. And so it's just, it's stunning to me how contemporary the active harm they're causing is. And so my Cornell question is, what other Indigenous communities are Cornell meddling in contemporarily? Because
Well, I don't know that I'm particularly well positioned to answer that. I mean, this is kind of, my immediate area of expertise. Okay, but I would point you to our Indigenous Dispossession blog that has a ton of information on this and can get you up to speed on that particular question. But it's more than one.
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions? Yeah, Charlotte.
I had a unrelated question. I was just curious if you guys have any oral history of if your people came from the south or if they came from the north.
We came from the north. And we have some, in our Medewin ceremonies, we recount that migration from the New Brunswick area. Those are our stories.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Forgive me if I might be saying this wrong. Ani, Indigenous Jesse. I'm native to El Salvador, and we have a small little Indigenous population there. And I'm currently trying to relearn my own native language based off of the document from 1975. What would you say within your community has been like the most effective in relearning, or like what are some ways that has like been very much beneficial to the community in terms of?
I think it was shocking for us when our elders, the ones who conducted our ceremonies, and the rest of us just sort of sat back and let them do it, And it was shocking to us that they all passed away. And all of a sudden, either it was going to die completely or we were gonna carry it on. In order to do that, we had to begin using language in spiritual. And I told Paul, when he said this to me, I said, who am I? You know, I'm not in their league, the ones that pass. I'm not in their league. And he said, Rick, we're either gonna do it or it's gonna die. And I think that people began seeing that all over the place. They just realized that either we're gonna do it or not, and the language is reviving. It's just remarkable to see how many of the younger people are speaking. Yeah, really it's special for me to see that.
And Chimigwech to everybody here. I think we'll call that for now, and please join me in thanking